Thanks, Karen. Absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you to Independent Schools Victoria for putting this event on, because it's a pleasure to reach out to all of you. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody, depending on where you are in the world. And I know that even though it is an Independent Schools Victoria event, we have people from all over the world either streaming in live right now or watching the recording. So if you're watching the recording, welcome to you as well. We're here to talk about this idea of learner agency. Now, learner agency speaks to the heart of what it means to be a human. The research behind it dates back to the 16th century, and it speaks to the nature of free will, our capacity to take action and change the world around us. The trouble is, though, it's rapidly becoming a buzzword. It's a word that until recently many people hadn't heard. And it's suddenly becoming something we've all got to do. We've got to do a little bit of learner agency. Learner agency is suddenly important. And the risk here is that the concept of learner agency will become one of those things that is really important this year and then not so important next year as we move on to the next new shiny thing. And I'm sure many of us in the room today can appreciate just how many things come through education like that. By the way, we'll know when that happens, when the idea of learner agency has gone from being something deep and rigorous to being something shallow and flippant. That'll happen when teachers start getting their professional learning from Pinterest. Because we know that's where it's happened in a lot of other areas, including mindset, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. That what should be and what is a deep and important subject has been, I won't say trivialized, but just smeared across the top, and we haven't really taken the depth behind it. So let's talk about what learner agency is all about. Learner agency, as I say, it speaks to this idea of having control over the world around you, about whether we have the choice to make a difference around us. And probably the easiest way to understand it is to think about what it isn't. Someone who lacks agency becomes the victim of their circumstance. The world acts on them. They feel at a loss. They feel like it's unfair. They'll say things like, why do these things happen to me? And that's sort of the way I think about it. When I think about people who lack agency, they're the victim of their circumstances and the world is happening to them. On the other hand, someone with agency takes control. They're the master, not the victim of their circumstances. And they are powerful rather than powerless in the face of change and adversity. And given the sort of world we know our children are growing up into, this volatile, uncertain, changeable, ambiguous world, this concept of agency, being able to control your circumstances, be the master of your environment, has come to the fore. There's a lot of definitions going around. We can talk about the way different states and nations are defining agency. But one of the things I've done for you is to bring some of that research together. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is in this document. Now, my wonderful assistant Jane is going to drop a link into the chat box right now to let you download this book. Now, this is a 28-page summary of the work behind learner agency, what it's all about, why it's important, and some of the key ideas that we need to keep in mind as we work with this idea in our schools. Now, I'm going to explore much of this today, but this will serve as your notes and your reference. Feel free to share this, and as you now look down below for the chat button and try to work out where the chat box is, there'll be a link in the chat box for you to download this. And as we go through the day, if you've got any questions about what I say or thoughts you want to contribute, pop them in the chat box as I'll glance across. My chat box is just over here. I'll just glance across from time to time and just check in to see where people are up to. For those of you watching the recording, there'll be a link to the Learner Agency book somewhere close to this recording for you. When I've gone through and I've looked at all the definitions that different schools, different organisations, different states and different countries are using for learner agency, it occurred to me that we needed something that's captured all those ideas together, a unifying definition. And the definition I came up with when I brought those together is this idea that learner agency is the degree to which an individual is able to take initiative and meaningfully influence their world, particularly in the face of adversity. And we're going to come to the importance of adversity here. It involves three parts: the environment to act, the will to act, and the power to act. Now let's go through these just quickly, and then we'll dive into what it actually means in schools and classrooms. The first thing to notice about this definition is that agency comes in degrees. It's not something you either have or don't have. It's something you develop over time. It belongs to the learner, and it's not something you do to them. It's something that they develop within themselves. Agency is about taking initiative. There's an element of choice, an element of deciding that the world has happened, but I'm going to do something about it by doing this and this and this, and to meaningfully influence the world. This is not about doing trivial things, not about doing easy things. This is about being able to respond positively and meaningfully in that volatile, uncertain, changeable and ambiguous world, that VUCA world that our students are growing up into. And I want to draw your attention to this idea that this is particularly in the face of adversity. Not about easy things, about being able to have control over difficult things. Because if we don't grasp that idea, if we're not clear that this is about helping students do more difficult things than they can do today, then we go down a path that leads us to voice and choice and ideas like that I'll explore in just a moment. I bring these ideas together, that definition together, around three core concepts. The first is the environment to act. Now, in the context of student agency or learner agency, we're talking about the school environment. Does the school provide an environment where students have choice? There are some environments, like prisons and places like that, where you have very, very limited choice and therefore very, very limited agency. If we don't have an environment in which we can exercise our choice, we don't have agency. The next part of the definition is to do with the will to act. Having the environment where you can have a choice and actually taking that choice are two separate things. The will to act is tied up closely with this idea of mindset. Carol Dweck's work on mindset. Now, I do a lot of work with mindset, but fundamentally, when the world happens to you, someone with a fixed mindset looks inside them and says, do I have the capabilities, the intelligence, the talents, the abilities to deal with this or not? And it's a yes/no answer. And if the answer is no, then you're going to be the victim of your circumstance. If the answer is, on the other hand, if you've got a growth mindset, you look inside yourself and say, well, I don't have the abilities at the moment. I will need to change to become the person who has the abilities. And so this will to act speaks to our mindset about whether or not we see the opportunity to become the person who can make the change in the world. But understanding that you can become the person that can make the change in the world and actually making that change are two very different things. And that's where this third part of the definition comes in, the power to act. It's not enough to know that you can make the choice. You've also got to understand how to make the change in yourself to become the person who can enact, to exercise that initiative and actually make the change in the world. So let's bring those three ideas together and look at them just one at a time. Our first one is this idea of the environment to act. A lot of schools have taken this idea of learner agency and said, well, what agency is all about, it's about students making choices, and it is. It's about students deciding they want to do this instead of this. It's about students deciding that I want the world to be this way, not that way. And it is about all those things. But without a deep, rigorous understanding of what agency is truly all about, what happens next is that some schools have taken that idea of choice and said, okay, what we'll do is we will give students choice. We'll let them decide if they want to do their assignment this way or this way, if they want to study this topic or that topic. We'll involve them in school councils, decision-making bodies in the school, so they can decide whether the school does this with their money or this with their money. And these are all good ideas, and I don't want to suggest for a moment that we shouldn't be doing that. But this idea of giving students voice and choice, what it can sometimes do is, rather than changing the student, all it does is changes the environment. Now, I'm going to say that again. If we want to help students develop learner agency, the important part is that the student is changed. If all we are doing is giving them the choice, giving them an environment in which they can make that choice, then we're not really changing the students. And in fact, I've seen this described in official documents, like national level documents, where we talk about wanting to give students a sense of agency. A sense of agency. I'm a little bit concerned about that idea of giving students a sense of agency. It's almost like it's pretend. And if we're giving students choices that they were already capable of making, then my question becomes, are we giving them, let me talk about this to start with. Most of us have seen students develop like this, that in the beginning growth is easy and then it sort of plateaus off like this. And this is a perfectly normal part of learning. This area down here we call our comfort zone, and this area up here we call our performance zone. And our comfort zone and performance zone are full of those things that we've already got the abilities to do. They're full of the things that we've already mastered, but importantly, they are full of those things that I call easy things you haven't done yet. The world is full of easy things that you haven't done yet. Things that you could do easily if you were just given the opportunity to do it or the need arose. For example, as I look across to the pictures over here, the screen that I'm looking at, how many of you know your 13 times tables? I'm just looking. One person went, oh yeah, a little bit. How many of you could know them by this time tomorrow? Yeah, you all could. It's an easy thing that you haven't done yet. Our challenge is that when we talk about developing agency, what we're talking about is not doing easy things. It's about taking on those difficult things. And they occur up here in our learning zone. Now, you might have heard this called the zone of proximal development. Who's heard it called the zone of proximal development? Yeah, I've never seen a child proximally develop personally. I've seen them learn, so I call it a learning zone, but it's exactly the same thing. Now, the thing is that down here, we already have agency over these things, as long as we have the opportunity. As long as the environment changes, we will be able to impact things down here. But up here, beyond our current ability, we have no agency. Right at this present moment, the challenges that are beyond your current abilities, you have no agency over. And unless you're capable of changing your current abilities, which is what we're going to talk about towards the end of this section, all the things up here will remain outside your current abilities. So if the sort of choices we're giving students in the name of helping them have agency in the school are all down here, my question has to be, are we giving them power to choose, or merely the permission to choose. Because if we're only giving them permission to choose things they've already got the capability to do, then we're not really developing their agency at all. Remember that in my definition here, in that definition there, one of the key elements was that we develop agency particularly in the face of challenges. Not when students are confronted with easy things, when they're confronted with difficult things, things that are beyond their current ability. Because it's those things that they're going to confront in the world outside of school. And they're going to need to be the ones that step up and say, this is beyond me at the moment, but I can become the person who can. And that's why it's really important for us to recognise, and the title of today's presentation is that we can't give students agency. If the work we're doing in schools around learner agency is a conversation about what teachers do, it's a conversation about the structures we change in our school, if it's what we are doing to students, then I don't think we're really developing students' agency. If we walk into a school and merely see students making choices they were already capable of making, we are giving students a sense of agency, but it's an illusion because all the power still remains with the teacher, with the structure. The only reason the student has that choice is because I gave it to them, or the school gave it to them. So the environment is an important element that we need to be offering students opportunities to make decisions. But those decisions, those choices, need to be difficult decisions, difficult choices beyond their current ability. And that's where this idea of the will to act starts to come in. This idea of mindset. As I said earlier on, someone with a growth mindset understands that when things happen, they're not meant to have the abilities. They're meant to go through a process where they can develop those abilities. But many of our students don't understand that. Many of our students have a relatively fixed mindset. They ask themselves, am I good at maths? Am I a leader? Do I have musical abilities? And they expect to discover whether or not they have those abilities. And unfortunately, schools are doing a really good job of telling students that's the way the world works. I spend a lot of time with a lot of schools unpacking the practices that we have in place currently that build labels, build limits, and build boxes around the students. And I'll give you a quick version of a longer story where a teacher, in my experience as a student, led me to have a fixed belief about abilities. I went to my first ever music lesson as a Year 7 student. There was a music teacher in a music room, and it was amazing. It was so good. We had drum kits in the room. We had bongos on the floor. We had drumsticks, and within 10 minutes of this lesson starting, we were making rhythms, and like it was a boys' school. We get to bang on the tables. It was so cool. I was inspired. I was so turned on by this experience. I thought, I don't need to be a musician. I can be a drummer instead. This is fantastic. Anyway, I went through the lesson. We got to the end, and the teacher asked us, hey boys, I just want to see who can do this. Now listen to that language. I want to see who can do this. And what he did is he put up a rhythm on the board, and he said, with your left hand, I want you to go ta, ta, ti, ti, ta, ta, ti, ti. And with your right hand, do the opposite, ti, ti, ta, ta, ti, ti, ta, ta. Now what happened next was this. We all went, he counted us in, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we went, none of us could do it to save our lives. We had a bit of a laugh, we went home. Now I went home and I thought, I reckon there's a way to do this. How hard can this be? I spent a few hours practicing, working out what the rhythm was, working out how to do it. Now, not that this scarred me, but it looks like this. 2, 3, 4. Now, I can see you all cheering and applauding. Thanks very much. That's great. Hey, thank you. It's hard. You give it a go. Anyway, I went to tell the teacher the next time I saw him. I said, hey, was this the thing you asked us to do? And I did it. And he looked at me and he went, James, that's amazing. Congratulations. Well done. How did you do it? And I told him about the practice and everything I'd done. And he went, so you can't really do it then. See, in his mind, and I can see Lorna shaking her head. In his mind, there were people who just could do it, and other people who had to work hard to make up for the fact that it wasn't naturally part of them. Now, you all gasp and think that would never happen in your school, but it happens every day. It happens every day that a teacher says, oh, don't worry, we can't all be good at that. Or, you're more of a language sort of student, aren't you? It's no wonder you can't do maths. Don't worry, Melissa's just naturally good at those sort of things. You're better at something else. And those messages send very fixed views of ability. Now, what happened, and this is the important part of the story from today's perspective, what happened in every other music lesson after that? I was so inspired, I was so excited to do music in that first lesson. In my second lesson, I sat at the back of the class. I didn't ask any questions, I didn't ask for a turn, because I figured there's no point in me even trying. I don't have the abilities. And so while there was an environment in which I could act, the school had a music program, the school had a drama program, the school did a musical every year, I didn't think those choices were open to me. And this is how mindset plays out in the idea of learnership. You become the victim of your circumstances because you don't think you have the choice to change it. And you hear people saying, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just not that sort of person. I'm not good at those sorts of things. And even though the choice might be presented to you, you don't take it. Now, this idea of mindset and how it plays out in schools is a complex one. And I want to give you another resource because I joked before about how many teachers are getting their wisdom from Pinterest. And that is certainly true in mindset. When you talk about how teachers are trying to change students' mindsets, there's a lot of posters that say, don't say this, say that. Don't say you can't, say you can't yet. Praise F and these sorts of things. And the fact is that those strategies just don't work. The research has come back in, the vast majority of school-based mindset interventions are not having an impact. In fact, Carol Dweck said recently that she was pointing out a growth mindset is even more complex than we imagined. In the beginning, we didn't recognise the complexity of implementation. And so to help you with that idea of implementation, Jane's going to drop in, oh wow, there's a whole lot of things come up. Good. I'm just browsing through the... Jane's going to drop in a copy of this ebook, which talks about the sorts of strategies we've been using for growth mindset, how we've been going wrong, and what we need to do to make a real difference to students' mindset. And in particularly how this plays into the idea of learner agency. So I invite you to download that and have a read through it. It's a significant document, 60 pages or so, big print, lots of pictures. But again, have a read through it so you've got an understanding of the depth and the rigor behind this work, and don't get sucked into the social media fad behind it. One of the main tools we use in that book, and it's in the title, is to recognise that we don't have fixed mindsets or growth mindsets. We're actually on a continuum. And so it's not a case of we see the choice or we don't see the choice. It's about we misjudge the cost of that choice or think we are limited to a certain number of choices. And one of the big differences, one of the big misunderstandings, I suppose, about a growth mindset is that there's that catchphrase about don't say you can't, say you can't yet. And a lot of people think that from the growth mindset perspective, the opposite of I can't is I can. If I've got a growth mindset, it won't be I can't, it'll be I can. And it's not. From a growth mindset's perspective, the opposite of I can't isn't I can, it's I could. In my music class, I said I'm not musical, there's no point in even trying. So I sat down and did nothing. Today, I have a growth mindset about music. I know I could develop musical abilities, but I don't have very many musical abilities. For those of you who joined right at the very start and saw me dancing, it's not great, but it's a bit of fun. My biggest musical influence was Peter Garrett in the 80s. So look, a little bit of this and it's all going well. But the point is this, that a growth mindset tells you I can grow. It doesn't tell you how to grow. And this is where the next bit of our work comes in. But if you want to know more about this idea of mindset, it's one of the workshops I'm doing with Independent Schools Victoria. I think, and Karen, I don't want to shock you at this point, but I think we're talking about live streaming this one as well, so it might be available to people online. Certainly, it's a big part of the work I do in a lot of settings. So if you're wanting to know more, 31st of August, which I think from memory is a Wednesday, at ISV in Melbourne, Victoria, we'll be running a full day workshop around how to implement strategies that actually change students' mindset. Because when we can move them along that continuum, help them become a little bit more growth oriented, they'll have more capacity to make the choice, the will to act. But the will to act is only part of the story. The other part, and the part I want to spend the most time on today, is this idea of the power to act. And the power to act is this idea of learnership. It's the recognition that there are some challenges, many challenges, that are beyond my current ability, that I just simply can't do at the moment. And what I need to do is raise the bar, learn to become more capable, increase my intelligence, my talents, my abilities, so I'm able to successfully confront those challenges that are beyond my current abilities. When I talk about that, I'm talking about this. Let's imagine this white line over here. This is the challenge that's in front of us. At the moment, it's in my learning zone. That means it's beyond my current abilities. I'm going to struggle, I'm going to fail, I'm going to make mistakes. If I want to be able to succeed at a challenge this difficult, I need to raise the bar. Raise the bar again so it becomes well within my current abilities. And it's this ability to raise the bar that I want to talk about in this last 10 or 15 minutes or so. And it's this idea of learnership. Think of learnership as the skill of learning. When you hear the word learnership, think of it in the same way as you think of craftsmanship or leadership. It denotes a skillfulness. And we've been talking about teacher professional learning now for a good 10 years, where we've focused very heavily on what teachers do in the classroom. In Australia, we have a document that came out, I don't know, about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, the Australian Standards for Professional Teachers, or something along those lines. Might get the words in the wrong order. But it defines what quality teaching looks like. And I've been to a lot of schools where I see a lot of quality teachers, teachers that understand how to set appropriate learning goals, teachers who are very skilled in giving formative feedback to students. And in those very same classrooms, I see the students receive the formative feedback and go, thanks very much, I'm done. I see those same students rely on the teacher to tell them where their learning zone is without taking any control of the learning process themselves. I see teachers going home exhausted because they're the ones doing the most work in the classroom. They're dragging students through the learning process, grabbing hold of that bar that we just talked about, that performance plateau as Anders Ericsson talks about it, and lifting it up for the student. I was reminded the other day about a quote, and I wish I could reference this quote. If anyone knows where it comes from, let me know. But a mentor of mine shared it with me years ago. And she said, James, never work harder than your students. And I see a lot of teachers working harder than their students. And so what we need to do, we can raise the bar for students. We can push them, pull them, drag them through the learning process. But if at the end of the day, they're relying on us to raise them to a new standard, when we're not around anymore, when they leave the schooling system, that's when their development of agency stops. We need to be going through a process that helps students take control of the learning process and to raise the bar on their own. So what I'd like to do in this last section is describe what learnership is about. And I'm going to share with you the Learnership Matrix that describes 6 different types of learners and breaks it up into 5 different elements of learning. 1 is the student's response to challenge. 2nd is how they develop their habits of mind. The 3rd and 4th is where they get information from, which is about feedback and mistakes. And the last is about what we traditionally call effort, that I've called time and energy, because it's not the time and energy that counts. It's how the time and energy is spent that counts. And here's a quick question for you. And you can ask this in the staff room tomorrow. The next time a student comes up to you with a piece of work that's not where you'd like it to be, which question are you more likely to ask? Are you more likely to ask, how much time did you spend on that? Or are you more likely to ask, how did you spend your time on that? Because they're 2 very different questions. So let's talk about this idea of learnership. Let me do this and I'll pop into the picture down here and I'll get out of your way. Our non-learners are the sort of learners that avoid challenges. And by the way, as I go through this, try and identify what percentage of your learners fit into each of these different types of learning. A non-learner will, if you give them options A, B and C, they'll say, do I have to do it? They'd rather do nothing than something. Oh, by the way, I can see people starting to jot this down, which is great. Jane, have you got a copy of the Learnership flyer? We can pop in there as well so people can have a copy of this. And there's also a copy of this in that first document. These students have no language to describe their learning behaviours. They don't have a cognitive anchor to describe what they do. They ignore your feedback and disregard mistakes. And their time is largely wasted. They're doing something other than trying to learn anything new. Now, I don't think we have a lot of non-learners in our classrooms, but this forms a baseline. This is a very passive, inactive learner. Our beginning learners are a little bit better. These are the learners that will reduce a challenge. If you offer them options A, B, and C, they'll say, can I have option D instead? They're always looking for the path of least resistance, the easiest option. They can be busy in class, but they're not working through the sort of challenges you want them to. They're the student, and who's got students like this? I hate to admit it, but I used to do this. Very often the teacher would put the hard tasks at the end of the lesson. So I would spend lots of time doing the easy things slowly, so I didn't have time to get onto the hard ones. That's what a beginning learner will do. These learners can describe the habits of mind retrospectively. They sort of fumble through the learning process just doing what they sort of do, and having done it, they'll go, oh yeah, when I did that problem, I had to ask a question, I had to check my answer. There's no planning, there's no forethought, but there's a little bit of reflection. They recognise mistakes and acknowledge feedback, but they do it like this. That's wrong. There's no further action. They just go, that's wrong. That's not complete, it's not finished. But there's nothing to do after that. and they spend their time doing stuff. These students spend a lot of time getting busy in the classroom, but not getting better. Then our next learner is our performance learner. Now, these learners are at least doing their current best. These are the learners that will limit their challenge. And when I say limit their challenge, I mean they do their current best. They're very happy to show you, ta-da, look what I can do. And then you'll say, that's great. Can you try this one? It's a little bit more difficult. And they'll go, ta-da, look what I can do. And they repeat the same standard over and over again without ever risking doing something more difficult that might lead to mistakes and struggle. They can apply their habits of mind with forethought because they've reached that standard before. And to reach that standard again, they're going to have to behave in much the same way. These students avoid mistakes by staying in their performance zone, doing their current best. They select feedback, and this always makes me laugh because who's got students like this? That you give them feedback and they go, oh, thanks, miss, that's great. All the things where you've said you've done this well, you've ticked the boxes, and as soon as it gets to the part where you've said, and I think you could do this better, and here's some ideas for improvement, they go, no, I don't want to read those parts. And they spend their time performing. They're the ones that go, I can show you what I can do. I love showing you what I can do, but never stretch and challenge themselves to do better. All three of these learners are what I call below the line learners. They don't actually grow at all, or very little at least. The directed learner is the first learner we actually see significant growth and improvement from. These learners are compliant, and the key characteristic of these learners is that the control of the learning process, the control of raising the bar, lies with the teacher. They'll attempt a challenge that you give them. They'll extend their habits of mind if you tell them that these are the habits that need to be developed and how to do it. They'll correct mistakes after you've pointed it out and told them what they need to do to correct it. They respond to feedback in much the same way, and they spend their time producing. And schools can get great results out of these students. Exhausted, spent teachers, but great results out of these students. The trouble is that they don't control learning. They need someone else to raise the bar for them. And so when they're confronted with challenges beyond their current ability, they need someone else to tell them how to get there. And if we're leaving students to exit school as directed learners, their agency will cease to develop as soon as they're a step away from the teacher. Independent learners take control of the learning process. They can target their own challenges. They know where their learning zone is and they actively go there. They develop the habits of mind. They need to raise the bar. They use mistakes and request feedback, and they spend their time striving. Now, I'll just pop down here. These sorts of learners are great. They're in control of the learning process, but they're selfish in that they set their own learning goals, and they're not terribly responsive. The learners that I think we need to cultivate are these ones, are agile learners, which, by the way, just what I mentioned, I happen to write a book about it called The Agile Learner, and we'll probably send you a link to it at some point. But our agile learners embrace challenges. And they embrace challenges in the spirit of JFK when he announced the manned missions to the moon, where he said, we do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. These are the learners that when you say, I've got options A, B, and C, these are the ones that go, which one of those is going to be the most difficult? Which ones of those are going to help me grow the most? Because they're out there embracing challenges to cultivate their habits of mind. They're actively seeking new information by designing mistakes and tailoring feedback. And the key element there is that they're making sure the information is there to be collected. And these learners spend their time growing. Now, we could spend a lot more time in there talking about what it means to be an agile learner and how we develop learnership. But I wonder, as you went through, where did you see most of your learners? I was doing a workshop yesterday with the Maths Association of Victoria, who, by the way, if you're interested, featured learnership on the front page of their journal, Common Denominator, for last month, and you can get a copy of that from their website. This group I was working with, we did a diagnostic tool that I've got to help identify the sort of learners that they had. 75% of their learners were either non-learners, beginning learners, or performance learners. If our job is to develop agency in students, and remember I started today saying how important this was, this is about empowering students to take meaningful action in a challenging world. If 75% of our students are below the line learners, then we are failing to develop the capacity to develop agency in the student. Some of them were directed learners and will develop agency along the way until they're on their own. It is only the independent and the agile learners that will continue to develop agency throughout life. Now, of course, this is a much bigger topic. Today, I've tried to give you the broad stroke, the big ideas behind this, and to understand the difference between the environment to act, the will to act, and the power to act, and how it's important as school leaders to ensure we're dealing with all three elements. Because too many schools are taking the easy path and focusing only on the environment to act, and even when they do that, they're really just giving students the permission to choose, not changing the students so they have the power to choose something more difficult. So the day after my mindset workshop, I'm doing a learner agency workshop where we'll spend more time talking about mindset and a significant amount of time talking about learnership. Folks, we are right on 4:45. I'm going to glance across just to see if I can see if any questions. I can't immediately see questions. If they come up, I will certainly hang around and answer any questions that come up. But I do want to thank you for coming here today. ISV will send you a follow-up, obviously, with a link to the recording, links to the resources. If you have questions, I'll hang around for another 5 or 10 minutes for as long as people want me to. You can always email me, and I'll turn that, let me just turn that off, and I'll turn this on. There we go. Email me, james@jamesanderson.com.au, or contact ISV. They've got my details as well. So Karen, thank you very much for having me today. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope everyone else has as well. And I will say good night for those of you who have to rush off and do important things like spend time with your family and loved ones. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Look, and I know that people want to do this, so I'll just let you do it. Thank you. We'll give people a moment to stream out and... Yeah.
Sorry, James, there's a couple of questions.
Oh, good.
What are your top 3 tips for helping students develop into independent agile learners? What's the impact of motivation on agency?
Yeah.
Really easy ones to just...
Oh, no, I can answer those. Let me turn around so I can actually see them while I do it, because I can't see the screen very well when I'm facing that camera. All right, top 3 tips for helping students develop into independent and agile learners. First one is the growth mindset. You don't need a growth mindset to become an independent or agile learner, but gee, it helps a lot. So the first thing is to talk about the student's understanding of themselves as a learner. Someone with a fixed mindset doesn't get learning. They think learning is about discovering their abilities. Someone with a growth mindset understands they're capable of growth and change. And once they understand that, the next obvious question is to ask, how do I get good at achieving that change? And that's what learnership is about. So first thing is about developing a growth mindset. The second is about understanding the learning process. So understanding what that learnership is all about. And a really key part to that I think a lot of students don't understand is being able to recognize their learning zone. All right, I think we need to make an explicit, and it's just an explicit part of our practice, this idea of recognizing when we're stepping out of our current abilities and going beyond. And that feeling of discomfort. I was working with a school recently in Brisbane, and they wanted me to work with them around their report writing. And they gave me a whole bunch of their reports to read. And as I read through them, it became clear to me that the teachers in the school were being almost apologetic for challenge. They would say things like, James works diligently at all these tasks, even when he finds them challenging. And there was like that sense of apology for challenge. No, we're meant to feel 7 out of 10, not 10 out of 10, 7 out of 10 uncomfortable. It's about stretch, not strain. So the second point I'm trying to make here is learn to identify the times when you should be in your learning zone and when you shouldn't, and what that feels like, and learn to get comfortable with that discomfort. I've got a post-it note that I keep in front of me over here that there is no growth without discomfort. We want learning to be easy. I mean, and we love the kids. And this is why mum and dad say things like this, by the way. Mum and dad sort of see you struggle and say things like, don't worry, sweetheart. Yeah, mum and dad weren't good at maths either, so maybe it's just not your thing. Because we're trying to protect them from the struggle. There is no protecting from the struggle, it's hard. So normalizing struggle and getting used to that feeling of being in your learning zone is the second thing I'll talk about. And the third part I'd talk about is this concept that I talk a lot about in my growth mindset workshops around what we call motivation calibration. And I mentioned that in the growth mindset document that you've downloaded today. But essentially motivation calibration recognizes that we're all capable of growth, but it's not free. Growth costs us. And being able to judge how much it's going to cost us to grow puts us in a better position to make the choice about whether we want to invest in that growth or not. And when we talk about goal setting, we've got to, this is an example, when we talk about goal setting, we need to include a section that says count the cost. And I don't just mean how long and the list of tasks that need to be completed. You need to include the feeling of frustration, the number of times you're going to quit, not just want to quit, you are going to quit. The number of people who I've met who said, oh, I was going to write a book one day, but you know, I thought I could do it in 6 months and I was going to write a chapter a month and it was going to be done by the end of 6 or 8 months. But I got to the end of the first week and I realised that I didn't know what I was writing. And I got to the end of the first month and had barely written an outline. And the true cost of achieving that goal was much bigger than they anticipated. And we tend to drop goals like that. So growth mindset, getting comfortable with discomfort and learning to understand your learning zone, and motivation calibration, knowing how to count the cost of growth, would be 3 important factors in pushing students towards becoming independent and agile learners. Of course, there's a much longer answer to that as well, because it's a big topic and I spend days unpacking those ideas with teachers. There was another question. What was it, Karen? You said, I can't see it now. Oh, motivation. Yeah, the motivation question. Gee, it's nice when they throw the easy ones at you. All right, my flippant answer to that question, who asked it, by the way? Who's asked it? Is that, oh, I don't know how to pronounce that name. I'm very sorry. Ewan? I'm guessing, it doesn't matter. I apologise, I can't pronounce your name. The flippant answer to the motivation question is this. If I could answer it well, I'd be charging for today's session. The better answer is that it has a lot to do with mindset. So remember my story that I told you, half an hour ago, where I talked about I was motivated, I was excited, I wanted to be involved in that music class. But the minute I was told, you're not like that, my motivation disappeared. So in terms of how does these ideas play out in motivation, when you don't think that there's ever a chance of you doing the things that we're talking about, if you think that challenge is always going to be out of reach, then you lose the motivation in the first place. And the third thing I'll say, and my answers are getting better and better as I go along, the book I would refer you to is a book by Daniel Pink. I think he's written the best work around what truly motivates people. And Daniel Pink wrote a book called Drive. And in it, he talks about the 3 factors that truly motivate people. Like once you're beyond the basics, once if you've been starving for a week, you'll do a hell of a lot for a meal. But once you pass the basics, the 3 things that truly motivate people are autonomy, having some choice. So there's that environment to act, having freedom to choose what you want to do. Mastery, seeing yourself improve. That's the raising the bar bit. And the third part is purpose. Seeing a purpose to what you do beyond the teacher told me to do it. And so when I see a question like that that says, where does motivation play into it? Carol Dweck talks about that a lot of people look inwards for their motivation, to discover what they're excited about. And the truth is we don't have internal motivation. There's no spark to become a musician or whatever it might be. What motivates us is that we have the choice to do it, that we gave it a try and saw ourselves improve, and that we saw that having purpose and meaning in the world. You know this firsthand. How many of us that are still on the call, and it's great to see so many people still here, by the way, how many of us have continued at something because we saw ourselves getting better at it? That sense of growth, that sense of change, that sense of it's becoming easier for me, I'm raising my standard, is in and of itself motivating. So when we get our students and teach them to be above the bar learners, to see the growth, it becomes a perpetual motion machine almost. And that's why it becomes our passion. We don't find our passion, it becomes our passion. Cool. Did I miss any other questions there, Jane or Karen?
There are a few things I've got to talk to you about afterwards, James, but I think that it's been a busy chat box today.
Good.
That could be it.
Yeah, I think we're good to go. Thank you. Thank you, Jane.
Cool.
Thanks, Karen.
And for the sharing of resources, and we've put those links, and you're right, I will send out all the links to resources and the Canvas course and the 2 events coming up.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for coming along. Feel free to reach out, and we'll see you again next time. Hopefully see you at the workshops.
Yeah.
Oh, now we've got to do this again. Where's my thing? Here we go. Hey.